traits of physical matter.
What's going on, my YouTubers?
This state was known as engram, and it allowed any idea imaginable to be stored. And of course, there were the exos, a project of Clovis Bray that allowed humans to transplant their consciousness into a mechanical body and live on past the point of normal human life expectancy. However, there are hints in the programming and the past lives of exos still alive today that give us an idea that they may have been more violent in nature. The exos dream of a place where they were born, the Deep Stone Crypt, and whilst some of them go there and walk peacefully through a field of golden millet, most of them dream of almost endless battle to reach the tower where they were born. But this is not to say that Clovis Bray was not the only one researching remarkable technologies for humanity, or making incredible discoveries throughout the system. The researchers of the Ishtar Academy on Venus at this time discovered the ruins of an ancient civilization on Venus that predated humanity by billions of years. These were and the ruins they discovered were those of the Golden Glass, and the infamous state of the Ishtar Academy and the Ishtar Collective would make it their responsibility to study the Vex and their constructs at any place possible. As our golden age magnified our glory, humanity's greatness shone like a beacon in the night, illuminating the very stars themselves, and convincing us that our destiny was not to remain on Earth like our ancestors, or to continue their petty wars, but instead was to reach forwards and upwards to the stars, and to grasp the very majesty and grandeur of the universe itself. We flew out into those stars and spread our wings. Alas, that we let our hubris get the better of us. Not all were so ill-prepared or foolish, though. Whilst most sat in complacency beneath the glorious bounty of the traveller, some, such as the three families of the Black Armory, would begin crafting phase technology and weapons so that they might fight back or defend themselves. A noble effort, but tragically, it would not be even close to enough to stop what would come next. As the centuries of the Golden Age passed, the war mind began to detect something far beyond the reaches of the system. Something dark and terrible. Something that spelled our doom. Rasputin's responsibility was to defend humanity, and to this end, the Exodus program was created. A colonization effort that involved thousands upon thousands of souls, all being loaded onto colony ships and sent outward to the stars. But in spite of this titanic effort by Rasputin and his subminds, such as Malahayati, in spite of the valiant efforts of General Chen Lanshu, in spite of everything that humanity would attempt to accomplish before the end, it would not be enough. As the vessels of the Exodus program began to reach further out towards the edges of the solar system, something terrible and dark swept them back in the other direction. The war mind raised its mighty weapons that were strong enough to shatter the might of stars, and responded to this threat with the full fury of its arsenal. But alas, even this was not enough.
As always, like, subscribe, and share the social media platforms.
The darkness had found our system, and in doing so, had found the traveler. Doom was upon us. The Golden Age was ending. The collapse had begun.
Power up, but it'll only go take me to cap 1260. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a little bit more.
The dark tide that was upon our system brought with it a terrible doom that could not be defeated by the war mind and its defenses. But the foe Rasputin faced was not by any measure what could be considered normal. The darkness, much like the traveller, defied simple causality and defied even the basic rules and logics of the universe. Physics, mathematics, there meant nothing before this entity.
It could not be defeated.
Coming in. Hi.
It was made clear from this moment that our annihilation was inevitable. The vessels further out in the bounds of our system were crushed by the darkness as they attempted to reach beyond the asteroid belt. These ships would eventually...
Ma'am, you hardly ever talk to me nice. I think that's supposed to be the other way around.
This place, this
I said, ma'am, you hardly ever talk to me nice. It's supposed to be the other way around, you know? Nigga, you be talking shit. No, I'm just saying, like, I know Amir's gonna want to. I'm saying, I know Amir's gonna want to ride. I know Kamari's gonna want to ride. What's the point of having them sitting in line now? How they?
But the darkness's fury was not yet sated. The darkness had another target in mind. It was also the traveler. The details and
but I'm telling you, who's gonna want to stand in line for 2 hours? It doesn't matter. It doesn't. You crazy. On a Saturday, you crazy. Who's gonna want to stand in line for 30 minutes to an hour? You really think Carolyn is gonna be packed like that? It do. Nobody's gonna want to stand in line for no less than 30 minutes, okay? That's the minimum you gonna stand in line. You know, you a Disney gal. You know, you go to Disney World. I'm just saying, you know, it's about the same as Disney. Six Flags too. Them lines be long. I'm talking line-wise, yeah. You gonna stand in line. You ain't got no pass. You think it's a game? I mean, that's because you don't go to places like Carowinds or Six Flags. Them lines be long, so just as long. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hammer said when he went, he let Juice sit his silly ass in line for a whole hour. When got him a fast lane pass and walk right past. I'm like, go stay in line, son? Or you coming with me?
One thing that is made clear by every entry.
I said, damn, it was that packed. He said, man, they ain't got no restrictions, bro. I said, damn.
At this time in the system, others were starting to stake their claims too. It was in these moments
they ain't got no restrictions. You already know it's wide open.
Chris and Storm, thousands, tried to hold themselves to the planet of Mars and to rain down an assault on Hellas Basin, where Rasputin's main control center was kept.
Right.
However, in a successful attempt to hold off the forces of the Hive Prince and the Worm God, Rasputin used his power to flash freeze the Empire. But the Worm God, the Prince, and their Hive servants away.
You ask a question of pure potential.
In turn,
Death
Rasputin
is
too
intrinsic
also
to the
experienced
answer.
a period of dormancy. We would hear nothing from Rasputin's true centralized network for centuries, as only fragments of the various empires that were still active across Earth and its territories. What happened next is an event clouded in mystery and uncertainty. Some spread rumors that the Traveler was in the process of fleeing the system, as it had done so many times before. Others spread rumors that Rasputin might have engaged the Traveler as it attempted to flee in order to prevent this outcome. And some merely believed that the Traveler was attempting to find the right spot to stand and fight against the menace that had embroiled itself throughout our system. Whatever the truth might be, the Traveler moved from its previous resting place on Io and found its way to Earth. Here it would make a titanic stand against its enemy, the darkness. The battle was long and would shake the heavens and the earth. A battle of proportions that the universe perhaps had never seen before, of the titanic forces of the cosmos, of a yin and a yang, smashing against each other, breaking upon each other like waves on rock, with enough force to level a mountain and raise it again within the blink of an eye. The two fought, the two stood, the two tested themselves. And what's more, The Traveler won. It was crippled and broken, but it sacrificed itself to save us and to push back the darkness. But its sacrifice was not without suffering. The Traveler's dying breath. Small autonomous drones filled the calm of its life.
Nah, bro said he only bought one. Nah, bro said he only bought one. And they all use that one. But at the same time, wasn't nobody riding but him and Juice too. Shorty wasn't getting on the ride, and Zai was too small for a lot of the ride.
The Guardians. With the terrible events of the final clash ended and the ghosts released into our system, the events that would make up the collapse would come to a close. But there was one far stranger account from the collapse that was given. An account from one of the Exodus program vessels that hit the asteroid belt just as the darkness was approaching in earnest. This vessel, Exodus Green, alternatively known as Yang Liwei, would become the crucible of the forces of light and dark, and would become the birthplace of an entirely new species of beings. It is here, in these most calamitous of moments, that the people known as the Awoken were born.
Not yet.
What follows next is a miracles shrouded in mystery. The report of how a new kind of movement moved into our world. One of both the light and the dark. They were known as the Awoken. Their history is recorded in a series of documents, but the most notorious is known as the Morrisena, which talks of the rise of their entire civilization and how they came to join humanity in the struggle that had consumed them. It speaks of a great rift, not only at the center of the Awoken soul, but also, in time, within the Awoken people. A people that would be living by circumstance, choice, and their leaders. The Morrisena also comes with a warning, namely that in our attempts to grasp its truth, we may in fact mistakenly learn to believe a lie. It is therefore, once again, at this point that I should state that the story of the Awoken's creation is told through a single source, and that the truth of the matter may yet elude us. But with that said, yet again, it is our only source of context. And so, as best we know it, this is the history of the Awoken. Aboard one of the Exodus program vessels, Exodus Green, alternatively known as Yang Liwei, the captain, Alice Lee, detected a strange signal that was following them for approximately 18 hours in radio silence. After repeatedly ignored hails, and just as Captain Lee cut the engines so that she might make a sharp about turn and face their ghostly stalker, a message was received from the airline residents.
SeaWorld.
Rasputin had detected a hostile extrasolar intruder in the system and initiated a car-air flight emergency, bringing all of the potential weapons in the system under his control. Rasputin demanded control of the Exodus Green and its onboard guns. But as Captain Alice Lee decided what to do next, torn between her colonial mission and her duty to Earth, darkness swirled around the hull of the ship, and through its veil, even the light and noise. Terrible gravity waves shook the ship as they saw numerous unrequested expanded every molecule of their vessel. After the boat from the crew came in, to continue onward instead of returning to Earth, Alice Lee attempted to send broadcasting the declaration of neutrality to their unknown assailant. Alice Lee stated that they wished to be treated as a separate species, but was not party to baseline human conflicts or their allegiance to the Traveler. She prayed that this would be enough to make a difference against such an indifferent darkness. It was at this moment one of them had followed the other out. Both of them, Mara, had gone out there to die alone. She had kicked off the hull with 50 kilometers worth of tether, and her brother, Aldrin, had followed her out into the darkness. As the message requesting the massive entity's indifference was broadcast by the captain, the darkness around them abated. Mara saw back in the light.
No,
I had to go to the hospital. And all the occupants
to Medical Park at that.
Behind her, crushed into the mighty presence of light that had just arrived, and the terrible darkness that swarmed the area. The colossal forces of light and dark that clashed here smashed into one another yet again, filling the space with so much power and energy that the universe.
But they ain't had no black people working in their reception office. So.
By the powers of powerhouse of entities, it was like divided by zero or counting infinity. The two violent entities finally reached an equilibrium. The real effect of the power began to manifest. The universe created a singularity, a gaping black hole, as an effort was made to seize the paracausal forces that were tearing the very seams of reality apart. The forces of the universe swirled and buffeted around Mara, and it was at this moment that the mistakes of the universe were to be swallowed inside the singularity. Everything pulled forth, and darkness and light continued to fight. And at this moment, Mara made a choice that changed the universe. She detached herself from the 50 kilometers of tether that joined her and the ship. And together, all of them moved down into the singularity. All of them had the same fate to be swallowed by this black hole. But Mara knew what she wanted. Mara knew her fate. She reached out at the edge of death. And she first. But it was not death and sweet silence that filled her. Instead, it was glory. The Roman records next speak of Captain Alice Lee experiencing a primordial experience. As her existence increased in complexity, she developed a small sense of purpose, and blossomed, until she willed into existence the world that she wished to have found for her. And in doing so, willed herself into that world as a being not of divine presence, but still of an immortal world. Then she fell to this love and lived upon it. She believed herself to be the first among the humans, and perhaps the only one. But then, lying on a black stone, somewhere near the crashed remnant of the ship, she discovered Mara. As Mara woke, she realized in a way of incredible belt, the folded fabric of hidden space-time. They were inside the black hole. Alice Lee inquired why it was Mara that happened to be second. Mara stated that she didn't know. The first lie to be told of this new world. But Alice Lee believed her, and so they went on to rouse their new people into this new world. And so it was that the crew was roused, and out of the original 40,900 crew members of Man Away, 40,891 awoke. 9 became the captain. A council was called, and with their leading council there some buildings. They called themselves the Awoken, because they were immortal. They called their new world within the singularity the Distributor. They believed that they should never return from where they had been. They created a group of specialists called the UTEX to care for the technology of the ship from which they had emerged, and decreed that under copies of they could produce the flesh. They handed balanced with 3 times more women than there were men. As a result, until November 1, they were placed under the protection of the women. Above all, some of the most important verdicts created at this council were the 6th, 7th, and 8th, stating respectively that the Awoken should know and love the cosmos, that the Awoken were created from a covenant of light and dark, but that the covenant was complete and no further debt should be paid. And finally, that the Awoken were whole of themselves, existing in balance. It was also at this meeting that a final complaint,
I don't know what Brandon's doing now.
which was the unanimous recognized Alice as their
A whole lot of free time.
explored their new world, charting its seas, forests, and stars. This was a great time of creation and pioneering. Whilst Alice Lee declared as her first rule that they would be no secrets amongst the Awoken, even here, in this place, paradise and prosperity, conflict brewed. The Awoken spread across the face of the distributor and took on as many diverse lifestyles as well. From intrepid hunters to seafarers to sage scholars, differences of opinion would dwell. Some would come to doubt their purpose in this world. Some dwelt within the cities and preached the doctrine and revered accepting the verdict. But the Awoken were made in the completed covenant of light and dark. Their death was prepared. They believed wholeheartedly that their place within the universe carried no responsibilities, and there would be no repercussions for their action. As many Awoken did, were of the Ecolized community, who did not believe in the verdict, and saw that the clash of detective forces that were received them. They believed that they owed the maximum debt. These two ideologies would not be so easily brought into balance. The Ecolists and the Atheists were divided, but then were still ignited flame. Ecolists, known as the Diaspora, went into the cities and loudly accused Alice Lee of deicide, the murder of gods. When questioned about this claim, she stated that when Alice Lee had created the world, he could have conceived that they should create the world as gods, so that they might be free from all forms of suffering and pain. Immortality was one thing, but truly powerful.
Yep.
And yet, to deny this, deicide was the appropriate term, perhaps. If this was true, this represented an original sin, and what's more, it represented a secret that Alice had kept, even as she had declared that the Awoken were secrets. The division between those that believed they owed a debt to the cosmos and those that did not ultimately led to a conflict between equal peoples, known as the Monosyllables. And whilst the nature of the conflict, at least in the more cynic, indicated the small nature, nonetheless, the balance between the two sides had to be struck by a truce negotiated. Alice Lee petitioned Laura Sol, who had been part of the Ecolized camp, to find her mother, who was a skilled negotiator and broker peace. The mother of Laura and Audrey, returned to life as an Audrey. Saw in Laura's names, however, and saw part of the truth, which was that Laura, not the Diaspora, was the source of the Ecolized community. Diaspora was merely a pawn. This was part of the truth, but not the whole truth. The truth that was known only to Mara for a great deal of time. The monarchy of Europe would in time wane in power, and a new group of scholars would come to be the most influential body of the universe. They were known as the Jensen scribes, some of whom still persist in the warlock orders of today. The scribes who would routinely send Jensen knights on missions to test the reality that they had been studying, knew that Mara and Angel were gathering lore and prophecies pointing to the Ecolists would be proven correct, and when the Awoken would be their dead. The Jensen scribes knew that this could cause another odyssey, and so when a tall, strong warrior named Sieur Ido walked into the court of the scribes, demanded the knowledge necessary to hunt and kill Mara for her supposed murder of the diocese, the Jensen scribes obliged and gave Sieur the knowledge she would need to hunt down Mara. However, a second awoken queen was rising to prominence in the Roman monarchy. Ngoya Pen received a cloaked and masked woman in her court one day, whispered by some to be Mara and others to be the diocese. Whatever the case, it mattered not, for after a long time of having a cloaked figure residing in her court, the monarch declared herself a true Ecolist. She bound the ambition and knowledge of the Jensen scribes to the Ecolists of her to pass, and so the scribes set about on the course of attempting to understand if evil could owe to the cosmos a debt or not. The royal palace was turned into a center of learning and a feast of ideas that radically advanced the Ecolists. Into this feast is Sieur Ida, her cloak and bow at her side. She believed that her figure to power, and so she followed her to a laboratory, deducing that this would now be the time to draw her weapon. However, as she was about to kill Mara, she saw her face and was bewitched by her beauty and her grace. And this clearly Sieur's decided to forget the diocese that she believed Mara could defeat and kill. She viewed the weapon between them and told Mara that she could not bring herself to kill, but would be dead when her battle. She would hold Mara to the end or die trying, and so Mara called upon Aldrin, her brother, who would battle upon her behalf. Aldrin suggested not one but 3 duels, with blade, rifle, and 5th generation superiority right. These duels and the prospect of Mara's murder troubled the Jensen scribes, as they did not want to appear to have invited murder upon the one who had extensively informed the beliefs of the queen. It would be like killing her priest or her closest confidant. They retreated from the Ecolist mission and from the queen's court. And as the scribes fled the palace in droves, many key contractors in the mission to understand if the Ecolists were correct or not sensed hesitation and withdrew their support too. To this, Queen Ngoya Pen denounced the scribes, called them faithless and selfish, told further deeply relations between the same the covenant was complete and the Ecolists. The Lord Dumbledore was second verdict. The political tension continued to deepen as Aldrin and Sieur held their duels. The first duel was held with knives and pitted Sieur's simpler, strong jabs against Aldrin's whirling theatre of the blade. But they were equally matched, and a draw was called. In the second challenge, the two chose one rifles and hunted each other for days throughout the jungle, whilst Aldrin blended in and used his stealthy abilities to hide and stake out the fight. Sieur simply let her blunt nature disturb the wildlife around her, which appropriately disrupted and revealed Aldrin. She shot him as he crossed a riverbed, wounding him, but not killing him. For the final challenge, the two chose 5th generation fighters, with the full complement of weapons available to either of them. If the full complement could not be supplied, most crucially, it would be simulated instead, and if a simulated kill was attained, it was worth equal value to that of a real kill. Not all weapons were available. In particular, a nuclear payload was not...
No, they gotta be somewhere on the bottom of Blandon Street.
Disposed of those weapons a long time before. Sieur
Like back the other way.
Tactical fighter with a payload of heat-seeking missiles, and Aldrin chose a ship.
Not towards Cat House, but back the other way.
An exceedingly old fighter with terrible onboard systems that would be easily outmatched by the faster Ermine. Sieur might have been able to sense that something was wrong at this point, but regardless, accepted the duel. And 8 miles out from engaging Aldrin in the middle of the sky, Sieur's computer informed her that in a simulated manner, Aldrin had killed her. In fact, he had killed her and everything in a 4-mile radius. Long ago, during an age when the dart was constructed, the Awoken had used military-grade ship-to-ship nuclear payloads on the dart. This was still a part of its payload, and Ultron had simulated firing one of these, and by the result, had ended the duel, and in a simulated manner killed Seer. After all their fighting, and after all the immense desire for revenge that Seer held, the two were tied. Seer threw herself before Mara, informing her that she had fought to a standstill with Ultron. Seer left her fate in Mara's hands, and Mara lifted her face, telling her to join them and to be of service to her. And so Seer did, and from that day forth until her dying day, served at the right hand of Mara Sov. Later, Mara would meet with Ngoya Pin, and Ngoya would inform Mara that she was abdicating the throne. Mara had manipulated the monarchy and the Jensen scribes to ensure that her needs, both scientific and political, had been accomplished, and Ngoya knew this. This was a rebuke, as much as one could be made against Mara, but it was already too late. Mara had accomplished her purpose, and was even planning ways to implement the monarch who would supplant Ngoya. After some more time passed, Mara finally put her plan into action. She proposed to the Awoken people and her followers that the hour of their reckoning was at hand, and that the time to repay their debt to the cosmos had come. Thousands flocked to Mara's banner, and an expeditionary force was formed, creating the basis for a journey by the Awoken people back through the black hole, back to where they had come from. The expedition was 12.1 million years in the making. The time was slower within the black hole.
Doing too much, my boy.
When they would emerge,
Doing too much.
hopefully not much time would have passed. Before she departed, there were two things. The first was to ask for a boon from the first queen, Alice Lee, and the second was to say goodbye to her mother one last time.
Right.
The mother who would not be joining Mara on the voyage back to Sol. In spite of all her power, and all her plans, and all her manipulations, Mara could not break her mind. She could not convince her to change her ways. Her mother was her mother, and did not wish to change her life. And Mara knew no matter how much they argued, she tried all the best, and their final words were bitter and representative. But this was nothing compared to the wrath that Mara would experience at the hands of Alice Lee as they spoke later. When Mara arrived, she endeavored to tell Alice Lee the truth, and for this truth that she would tell, the boon that she would ask of Alice Lee was forgiveness. Alice Lee had always suspected that Mara was behind.
That's what I can imagine.
So greatly, she wanted Mara to be the one who influenced the laws, the economists, into creating a society that would always have a discontented few, feeling guilt in their debt to the universe. But she could not possibly imagine the scale of the brilliance of Mara's design. Mara told her that Alice Lee only believed herself to be the first being in existence. And she only believed herself to be the first, because Mara had decided it in that way. For it was Mara who had been the first to cross the horizon that led to the distributor. Mara had designed the world and its supporters. Mara had wanted the vision of the world. So 12.1 million years later, she could actually plan the human state of evolution, so that she could skeptics and bring back through the singularity to confront the cosmic war that had birthed her, so that they get back to the universe. Is this a sin within the distributory, the manifestation of evil that Mara asked for forgiveness for? Forgiveness was not what she received from Alice Lee. It was only fury. It was time for Mara and the expedition to depart at long last. The Awoken were returning to the place of their true world. Before they left the world of the District 3, there was a word. Retribution of some form had come through. Missiles from the surface of the District 3 planet were being launched. Mara initiated an emergency launch.
Only the strong survive 2020.
Despite the slew of missiles
and I meant emotionally wise.
The crews made it mostly unharmed. But Mara was unable to send a final message to her mother, and so she would never know anything more against her. But now was not the time for sorrow. Now Mara needed resolve. She returned to the singularity, and emerged back in soul.
No, they don't.
On the other side, they were greeted by a system meeting. The collapse had taken its toll, and Sol was mostly unrecognizable. The once mighty domain of humanity was left shattered and ruinous, left in squalor, without hope of salvation or nobility. When the Mara and the Awoken dead to the cosmos to subject the fate, one could potentially hold the 12 year. But the reality before them demanded a response now. Humanity was on its last legs, and undoubtedly the Awoken could help. Initially, they settled around a mass of strange ships, broken but tangled together in the Vesta. This kept one, and in the end, this was something that would serve the new life of the Awoken. This would now be their new domain, the Reef. As they settled, Keldawaj and the other Utegs who accompanied them, now known as Tekkens, divined that some kind of magic had followed them through, and that the Awoken were giving off a strange series of effects, best described as magic. They defined the powers of the universe. Mathematics, gravity, justice, and darkness and light, but tied to neither. Some Awoken were capable of this dangerous effect, and others were not, but the effect was strongest around Mara. The Awoken would then also endure a series of attacks by the Elixir, who had succeeded in following the travel of their system of origin, all the way to the neglected versus Sol. The Awoken fought back when they attacked. Mara and Aldrin and Zure led the charge every time. Zure's might, Aldrin's speed, and Mara's raw power delivered the Awoken to victory. It was around this time, however, that Mara would also be petitioned by the Awoken for the right to leave the fleet of ships in the Reef and to immediately aid the remnants of humanity. Mara's plan involved them building up a base of power in secret so they could better understand the system before them. The Awoken who wished to leave immediately, however, grew tired of this, and after one craft made a break for it, Mara's own wish was that the Awoken should be given a choice. In all fairness, she had no other options. Mara stated that they were given one chance, and that if they chose to leave, they would not be permitted to return. And so the once riven Awoken were riven again, and those that departed for the worlds of humanity would be of great assistance, but they would no longer be known as the Reef-born Awoken. They would be known as the Earth-born Awoken. Thus, a great people was sundered twice. The Earth-born Awoken that went out into the system were greeted by horrors present to the collapse and the following age of darkness that came with it. They would help to rebuild, but there was no longer a system in which they could see humanity flourishing immediately. The Golden Age was gone, and when the Awoken had returned, humanity had spun into a new
Well, they tried to get me help when my grandma died because I was the only one at the funeral that didn't cry. Like, I had to go to therapy and all that shit, but the only reason... No, but see, this is what I had, like, to get across to my therapist, right, was I was all cried out. I helped take care of that lady till she took her last. I had them grieved. I had them got it all out. The anger, the depression, all that shit. I had them got it all out. So by the time her funeral came, I was the only sane one in the house. And I thought I was crazy though, because I was kicking everybody out. Because while my mama's sitting there trying to grieve, people picking up stuff, trying to walk out the door and all kind of crazy shit. You know what I'm saying? Like,
left shattered and broken, with no clear means of communication with our outer colonies.
oh, Faith, you need to get him seen.
Not only did humanity face the constant pressing troubles of starvation and exposure, but they also now shared their worlds with a series of strange and deadly forces from many other regions of the universe. The Vex, that had once been found on Venus, had surfaced on Mars and Mercury as well, and had utterly transformed Mercury from a garden world into one that was now entirely mechanical, with at least a portion of it hollowed out into a giant simulation engine known as the Infinite Forest. Aside from the Vex, a military power known as the Cabal had also sent 5 of its legions to secure Mars, and to set up a base of operations there so they could launch campaigns into the rest of the system. The 5 legions, the Sand Eaters, Dust Giants, Siege Dancers, Blind Legion, and Skyburners, fought ferociously, knowing that they could only return home if they completed their mission here. Whilst on Mars, they also began to contest the Vex for ownership of the world, but the Vex defended in great numbers, defending almost more fiercely than they did at any other place. The Elixni had also followed the Traveller into Sol, and were now known as the Fallen by the facets of humanity that encountered them. They spread throughout the system from the Jovian moons to Venus to Earth, with several major houses such as the House of Devils and House of Winter laying claims to vast tracts of land within the territories that were once humanity's. Earth's Cosmodrome in particular was a point of great infestation. And finally, arrived to the vanguard of Oryx's hive, with the hidden swarm, Blood of Oryx and Spawn of Crota, all taking root within Luna. They dug deep into our moon, prepared for yet another one of their grand conquests, creating a shadowy, subterranean fortress known as the Hellmouth, in the region formerly known as the Ocean of Storms. This would burrow so deep into the core of the moon that no light could reach its deepest recesses. These alien forces would help to set the world into chaos, and in the Dark Age, almost nobody could consider themselves to be safe from the conflict that had engulfed all the worlds of humanity. At this time, the last of the light bearers began to rise and stake their claim in the world around them. These aliens, guardians, were not truly guardians. They were tyrants who saw their newfound immortality as a tool to be abused, as well as their light. There was no duty for them, and all they sought to do was to wage war on whatever they could get their hands on. Many of them acquire valuable weapons and assets throughout the system, and for a time, humanity's only source of hope would instead be a source of tyranny. But that is not to say that all of the risen Lightbearers were conquerors or villains. Amongst their number rose an order of men and women who would be amongst the first to and Saladin represented some of the first true saviors of humanity. However, defending humanity was not an easy task. Much of them had been disappointed or lost, broken in the terrible calamity that was their lives. As figures have sometimes into small towns, some of the most favorite places of power, which planted their flags and endeavored to limit the systems. But the notice level in the world traveler to the place of its final titanic battle against the darkness. Defended by around the fires. In such a dissolution moved quickly into adversity. Rudimentary factions began to rise with differing outlooks on the best way to control and run this would-be kingdom. These factions grew until eventually risen forces backed them on either side, and with them involved, conflict eventually broke out in the form of what would be known as the faction wars, with some among the risen, however, seeking to end the violence. It was this movement the factions were broken, but the risen who had backed them on either side of the divide were united and collapsed upon the fallen with terrible power. The fallen were repelled, and the new factions were left broken. However, this was a lesson, and the Guardians sought to see that this would never happen again. This was Guardians. For after all, had they not simply accomplished their duty to defend humanity from the system? From this conflict, a new system of governance was born. It would be impossible to stop the factions from existing, and so the Consensus was created, as well as the Vanguard. The Consensus was a council of both the Vanguard and many represented factions, all of which would be able to submit proposals. A leader of sorts, the supposed ability to speak to the traveler. The Vanguard was something entirely different. The Vanguard was a part of the Consensus. They were a council of 3 Guardians, one from each discipline, hunter, with them, the Guardians would be representing them. And so at last, laws were passed and enacted. A government with clear authority in hand was born. With it, the turmoil of the people began to cease, and what was once a small camp of refugees with the traveller began to grow. First into the final vast that he fell broken God. Then he entered the last city. But this lost city was enough challenges or foes. The most persistent threat is ever that of the Fallen, with their lightning-fast raiding parties and their unlimited boxes of piracy eventually grow into a perpetual siege that would be as defining a characteristic of life in the city as the very air they breathed. The siege in itself, and the very notion of the Fallen continually attacking the city's walls, was nicknamed the 100-Year Siege. However, to counteract this engagement threat, the titans of the city were the solution, the needs of the waves. As the walls were built, great defensive installations were placed along their borders, including 8 towers, now number. It was the hope that such a great deterrent, bristling with both the light-bringing Guardians and the death-bringing replacements of the Guardians, would be enough to keep the citizens of the last city safe from the Fallen. However, the problem was not one that could be solved by high-levels and terrifying communities. The Fallen were driven not just by anger, but by a desperate faith. Their true prize was not the eradication of the city or its inhabitants, the reclamation of the Great Machine, or as we know it, the Traveler. The Fallen had been seeking it out across the dark vacuum of space in true desperation, and imagine their jealousy to understand that when they found it, not only had it been destroyed and was in possession of humans, but those humans had not only given them their own golden age as they received, but now were filled with the ranks of Guardians, those who truly used their power. Such great not only the madness of the desperate who would dare to fight and entertain. It was then that the Fallen of the House of Devils, with its strongholds located predominantly in Europe, Asia Minor, and Old Russia, struck out in a combined attack on the city. This would be one of the first true tests of the city's reserve, as the
You said you was getting high. What you say? You said you was doing what every night?
Held the 6 approaches to the city in coordinated defense against enemies. A great attack was made, and as it was repulsed, there was a chance to charge. But the Titans, who was under their order, thirsty for blood, held to discipline, and held the line. The battle was long and fierce. The fallen outnumbered them to an almost comical extent. When the Guardians and the Operator side approaching together, being outnumbered and overrun, the Titans that day held back the force 6 different rounds, and not a single one of those fronts had been broken. This would be the first great victory for humanity in the Dark Age, and this would be the first time the city had ever been defended against a truly overwhelming foe. It would be forever remembered as the Battle of the 6 Fronts. And this battle was such a great honor to Titans that it remains represented in their heraldic iconography to this very day. The Titan hexagonal designs harken back to this and always be reminded to fall. But it was not merely Titans that made up the defenses of the city on this day. One of the most prominent sets of heroes that rose also in a war book by the name of Osiris. The Titan of 714 witnessed his incredible skill in battle, seemingly using almost the same all places that he won at any single point in the battle. And it was at this point that 714, who had closely allied himself with the speaker, recommended that Osiris should be elevated to the vanguard of the organization. The relationship with the speaker and 714 was so close that they referred to each other as father and son. Saint's recommendation the speaker obliged, and Osiris was proclaimed for vanguard. The only dissenting voice in this decision was that of Lysander, the confidant, a version of hearing Osiris of his incarnation, the resurrection of the ghost. The victory in 6 months marked not only the end of the first fantastic unity, also marked the awesome once again in earnest. This would be the end of humanity's dark age, where before they had cowered in huddled masses, trampled and prayed for deliverance. The Iron Lords, with the Guardians, with the city, that deliverance had come. Now, time for humanity to stand once more and to fight back. This was today amongst the number of the Guardians, the birth of what will be known as the City Age.
Dirty. Wow.
The City Age may be named after the city, but one of the most important things to know about the City Age is merely to do with the incomplete nature of humanity's knowledge. At the time being, there were no dates, no timelines, and of course, our idea of what was blurred, partially incomplete. Such is the nature of a post-apocalyptic era, and there is no real consensus, therefore, that the City Age truly began. For some, it was in the victory in 6 months, for others, the formation of wars, and for a few still, it was at the creation of camp. But regardless, the City Age began, and it played hosts to ballads and legends. The city would expand and grow to a powerful bastion of humanity, and the Guardian Orders press out into the solar system, and use its way deeds. However, the first image that is noted in the timeline of the City Age is of real significance, is that of a terrifying most majestic and dangerous creatures within the system. It would start with the event known by the Guardian Orders as the Great Hunt. But in order to better understand the Great Hunt, you need to start in the reef, not the city. Back in the Dark Age, when the Awoken had just been split into the Earth and Reefborn, Lara instructed Aldrin to go out into the system and to discover for her a unique source of power. Aldrin returned with what is known as a wish dragon, an Ahamkara. Ahamkara are dragons, both sentient and intelligent enough to speak, bargain, and deceive. But this was not the only thing that made the Ahamkara extraordinary. Ahamkara were shapeshifters, capable of growing massive or minuscule in size on a whim, and also had access to a special kind of magic, known as wish magic. This power, as best we know, holds no allegiance to the light or dark, but it manipulates the threads of fate and the fabric of the universe in a similar manner to the power of the light and the dark. It was not some stupendous power capable of crushing atoms, but instead it was a simple thing that could manipulate the universe without necessarily invoking its physics. Wish magic was named such because it relied on preying on the ambitions and desires of those not strong-willed enough to contest the Ahamkara. The Queen and the dragon Aldrin recovered eventually forged a bond, and the young Ahamkara would come to name itself Riven in honor of the twice-riven people that was the Awoken. More Ahamkara flocked to the reef, and society began to revolve around them. It is here that wish magic and the incredible designs of the Awoken came together to create what is known as the Dreaming City, a sacred place to the Awoken, even the stars of the reef itself. In this place, the Ahamkara and the Awoken live in relative harmony. All seemed peaceful. The Ahamkara could be found all over the system, and the power she sought was not in fact so evil. But this was not to be forever. She would soon have that unique source of power. It was at this time that the city also began to encounter the dragons, and at which point they realized the danger that they posed. The bargains struck with the Ahamkara and granted the Guardians great power and wisdom and information that was crucial to their campaigns. But
I know lately,
as come at a terrible cost.
Lately going, it hasn't been packed.
For every wish granted, there was a terrible, twisted reality to it. One that would always come at the cost of the Guardians themselves or someone around them. With their presence becoming a threat to the safety of the city itself, it was agreed by the consensus and so the Great Hunt began, with the city even quietly petitioning the Awoken monarchy for aid. This aid was granted to them in the forms of weapons to hunt the beasts, although this aid was even secretly made available at the request of Riven. Perhaps Riven was fulfilling Lara's wish for some source of power which is always granted the Ahamkara, or perhaps for some unique advantage. But regardless, many great warriors took up the weapons of the Awoken and the city, and took part in the hunt, or at least the process of it. Many terrible final wishes were made by the beasts and their assailants. Some of the scars of those wishes can still be seen today. Though, as with all things to do with wish magic, there are many details that are unclear, or as of yet, unproven. Regardless, the Ahamkara were hunted to the very brink of the with only women surviving, trapped within the fortified citadel in the heart of the Dreaming City, in a place known as the Gate. With that, the only way the Ahamkara could communicate to us was through their remains, which held some of their latent power. But for the most part, it would be generations, even hundreds of years, before the Guardians saw another Ahamkara ever again. However, it was not just the Ahamkara that would start to see their end this time. The days of the Iron Lords were also numbered. They had continued to exist and to defend the city as they grew in number, sending out Guardians from their basic operations on velvet. The Order had grown to at least 100 in number, but Radagast lamented that whilst he and his Iron Lords could defend humanity and watch over the vast tracts of Earth, they could not so easily return humanity to its golden age of technology. But when Lord Timur, a warlock of the Iron Lords, discovered records of the lost golden age technology of Siva, Radagast leapt into action. The nanotechnology could potentially rebuild the marvels that humanity had lost, and with it at their command, there was the potential for them to perform incredible things. When the location of the technology's whereabouts had been discovered, particularly the replication complex in the northeastern section of the Cosmodrome, every one of the Iron Lords descended on that part of the world in force, hell-bent on claiming the technology for humanity. It was discovered that the billions upon billions of Siva nanites were still under the command of a fragment of the Warmind Rasputin. And in a moment that would resound throughout the ages, the infamous Iron Lord warlock known as Fellwinter attempted to commune with the shard of Rasputin. However, for reasons not truly understood, the Warmind sent its response in the form of a 3-word command to the millions of nanites of Siva. This command would spell doom for the Iron Lords that laid claim to this ancient technology. Those words: replicate, eliminate, immunize. And so full of fury that only a weapon such as Siva could contain, Siva's nanites were unleashed upon the Iron Lords. The battle was one of terrible proportions, and it was certainly clear that if Siva was not contained, it was liable to overrun the Cosmodrome, and from there, who knows what it could do. 9 Iron Lords made a push for the replication complex, where the source of the Siva nanites could be found. But after much fierce fighting, it was clear that all hope was lost without great sacrifice. Lady Yolda took it upon herself to seal the replication complex with 7 other Iron Lords and herself inside, whilst also detonating an explosive device that contained the outbreak of Siva. The only Iron Lord to survive the replication complex was Lord Saladin, and the battle outside in the Cosmodrome had seen all the other Iron Lords slaughtered, with the exception of Lady Ephrodite, who went on a path of exile, pacifism, from that day onward. The area of the Cosmodrome containing Siva was, from this point onwards, quarantined, and from that day forth the region would now be known as the Plague Lands, for the mechanical plague that lay dormant beneath its surface. Lord Saladin would wait and watch, holding silent vigil over the place, until the day that he might finally be needed again, to finally bring rest to those Iron Lords that had been lost. Meanwhile, back in the city, trouble was starting to brew. Osiris, the new Warlock Vanguard, was descending into a deep and secluded study of the Vex. He knew that other threats to the city, such as the Fallen, did exist, but his research had left him convinced that the Vex represented the greatest present danger to the forces of the city and to the Guardian Orders. These beliefs brought him into contention with the rest of the consensus and, in particular, the Speaker. When Osiris sought to publish his findings in order to arm the people of the city with knowledge, the people instead took to them not as scientific study or fact or even merely as speculation by a scholar. Instead, they took to them as prophecy. Such was the cult of Osiris's personality. The Speaker then saw this as an attempt to radicalize and split the population of the city between those that supported Osiris and those that supported the consensus. The Speaker even took to the extreme measure of burning the prophecies of Osiris, and began to speak of the once revered warlock as though he was a curse. One day, the Speaker called the consensus to order and declared that Osiris was a tumor to an otherwise healthy body, and called for a motion to exile the warlock. It was at this moment, however, that Osiris entered the hall of the consensus and accepted the decision wholeheartedly. Osiris